World Empires Series Part 7, The Fall of Rome and the Rise of Islam, Chapters 3946 400 700 Add Introduction. The Roman Empire has become Christian. The Nicene Creed is law. The temples are closed. Jerome has produced his Latin Bible. Augustine is writing in North Africa. It seems as if the world has found a kind of stability, a Christian Roman Empire that might endure indefinitely. And then the barbarians arrive. Chapter 39, The Barbarian Invasions. The word barbarian comes from the Greek. It originally just meant anyone who wasn't Greek, someone whose language sounded like bar to Greek ears. By the time of the late Roman Empire, it referred specifically to the Germanic and other peoples pressing against Rome's northern and eastern frontiers. These were not simply raiders. The Goths, Vandals, Franks, Burgundians and others had been in contact with Rome for centuries. Many served in the Roman army. They admired Rome. What they wanted was not to destroy Rome, but to share in its wealth and prestige. The problem was that Rome could no longer absorb them on its own terms. The crisis point came in 376 AD, when the Visigoths, themselves fleeing westward from the terrifying Huns arriving from the Asian steppes, begged to cross the Danube into Roman territory. The Eastern Emperor Valens agreed. But Roman administrators treated the refugees brutally, extorting food from starving people and enslaving their children. The result was rebellion. In 378 AD at Adrianople, the Visigoths destroyed the Roman army and killed Valens himself, the first Roman emperor to die in battle with a foreign enemy in over a century. The sack of Rome by the Visigoth king Alaric in 410 AD was the psychological earthquake. 800 years had passed since a foreign enemy had entered Rome. Augustine, hearing the news in North Africa, began writing The City of God. Jerome in Bethlehem wrote, "The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken." Chapter 40, The Fall of the Western Empire, 476 AD, is the date conventionally given for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, whose very name combined the founder of Rome and the founder of the empire in a poignant coincidence, and sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople. There was no longer any need, Odoacer declared, for a separate Western emperor. But here is the thing contemporaries barely noticed. The Western Empire had been functionally irrelevant for decades. Germanic kings had already been controlling Italy, Gaul, Spain, and Britain, while maintaining the fiction of Roman authority. Odoacer was simply being more honest about the situation. The modern idea of a dramatic fall was largely created by Edward Gibbon in his magnificent and opinionated Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, published in 1776. Modern historians prefer to speak of a transformation. Roman institutions, Roman law, Roman Christianity, Roman Latin all survived. They became the foundations of the Germanic kingdoms that replaced the Western Empire. The roads were still Roman. The bishops were still Roman. The law was still Roman. The language, evolving into French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, was still Roman. What had ended was the political structure. What survived was arguably more important. Chapter 41, The Byzantine Empire. While the West was transforming, the Eastern Roman Empire simply continued. Its citizens called themselves Romans until 1453 AD, a full 1,000 years after the Western Empire's collapse. We call them Byzantines, after Byzantium, the Greek city on which Constantinople was built. They never called themselves that. The greatest Byzantine emperor was Justinian I, who ruled from 527 to 565 AD. Justinian reconquered North Africa, Italy, and part of Spain from the Germanic kingdoms, briefly reuniting much of the old empire. He built the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, still one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. And he commissioned the Corpus Juris Civilis, the codification of Roman law that remains the foundation of civil law systems across Europe and much of the world today. But Justinian's conquests were expensive and exhausting. The bubonic plague struck the empire in 541 AD, killing perhaps a third of the population. The wars in Italy devastated the peninsula for decades. By the time the Arab armies swept through the eastern provinces in the 630s and 640s, Byzantium was weaker than it had been for generations. Yet it survived barely. Constantinople was besieged twice by Arab forces, in the 670s and again in 717 to 718 AD, and held both times. Without Byzantine resistance, Islam might have penetrated Central Europe centuries earlier. Chapter 42, Arabia before Islam. To understand Islam, you need to understand the world it was born into. And that world, 7th century Arabia, was very different from the world being transformed by the later Roman Empire. Arabia was a peninsula of extraordinary geographic diversity, harsh desert in the center, fertile coastal strips, high mountain ranges in the south and west. Its population was organized into hundreds of tribes, some nomadic Bedouin, some settled in oasis towns. Social order was maintained not by a state but by the honor code of the tribe, by the obligation of vengeance, and by the marketplace of alliances. Mecca was not a large city, but it occupied a position of extraordinary religious and commercial importance. The Kaaba, a cube-shaped shrine at the city's heart, was the center of pre-Islamic Arab religion, housing hundreds of idols representing the gods of different tribes. The annual pilgrimage to Mecca brought people together, created commercial opportunities, and maintained a kind of peace during the pilgrimage months. The Quraysh tribe, who controlled the Kaaba and the pilgrimage trade, grew wealthy and powerful. Into this world pressed the exhausted empires, Byzantium to the north and west, the Sassanid Persian Empire to the northeast. The two had been at war almost continuously for decades. Both were militarily spent, economically strained, and incapable of projecting power into Arabia. The stage was set for something unexpected. Chapters 43 through 45. Muhammad and the Arab Conquests. Muhammad ibn Abdullah was born in Mecca around 570 AD, a member of the Quraysh tribe. Orphaned young, he worked as a merchant and became known for his trustworthiness, Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Around 610 AD, meditating in a cave outside Mecca, he reported an overwhelming experience, the angel Gabriel commanding him to recite. His wife Khadijah believed him. The revelations continued for 23 years, and their compilation became the Quran. Muhammad preached monotheism and social justice in Mecca, and the Quraysh elite, whose wealth depended on the polytheist pilgrimage trade, persecuted him and his followers. In 622 AD, he emigrated to Medina with his community, an event called the Hijra that became year one of the Islamic calendar. In Medina, he became not just a prophet but a political and military leader, uniting the city's Arab tribes and establishing the first Muslim community, the Ummah. In 630 AD, he returned to Mecca with 10,000 followers, took the city with little resistance, and cleansed the Kaaba of its idols. In 632 AD, he delivered his farewell sermon and died. Arabia was unified under Islam for the first time. What happened next was one of history's most startling military expansions. Within a decade of Muhammad's death, Arab armies had conquered Syria and Palestine, destroyed the Sassanid Persian Empire, and seized Egypt from Byzantium. Within a century, the Islamic world stretched from Spain in the west to Central Asia in the east. The speed was breathtaking. The exhaustion of the great empires helped. The Arab fighters' conviction that they were doing God's will helped more. And the Islamic system of governance, tolerating Jews and Christians as protected peoples, the dhimmi, gave conquered populations often better conditions than they had under Byzantium or Persia. The Battle of Tours in 732 AD, where Charles Martel halted the Arab advance into France, is traditionally marked as the high-water mark of Islamic expansion into Western Europe. The religious map of the Mediterranean world was now set in approximately the form it would hold for the next 1,000 years. End of Part 7.